Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I am here with,
Well, I'm Aaron Pollyea.
And I'm Al Spader.
yes, and we've interviewed Al many times. We talked about some of the Once Upon, we talked about Star Trek Adventures. We were talking about Monsters of the Week one time, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And Aaron, it's great to meet you as well. And
Oh,
today we're going to talk about something you've both worked on called Redacted,
hmm
which, if I may share the story, if Al doesn't mind, when I first heard about this, when he first mentioned to me, hey, there's something I want to talk to you about, Redacted, I was like, okay. And he kept mentioning it. I was like, all right, when are you going to tell me the title of this game? Um, I was like, wow, must be a really good title if you can't tell me what it is. So I'm like, oh, it must be a property issue or a copyright issue. But no, this is the actual name of
yeah.
the title, Redacted, which made me love hearing about this even more. For anyone just coming in and hearing about this for the first time, what is Redacted, the role playing game?
Redacted is set in a world that is exactly like ours, but it's sort of like a hidden aspect to our history where the Roswell crash, the Roswell UFO crash actually happened in 1947. And the US got a hold of all this alien technology, and the aliens, the Greys, found out about it and thought, boy, we really screwed up. How do we fix this so the US doesn't just use this against all of its perceived or real enemies? And they gave the same technology to the Soviets. And so this is set in the 1950s, where the Cold War is still happening. All the events in our world are still happening, but also all the very strange UFO conspiracies and UFO sightings are all real. And the Cold War is also being fought in space. So all those strange things that you see in like B movies from the 1950s, those are probably possibly happening out there. And Majestic is funding the creation of the movies to help cover it all up.
If I may ask, especially since this is your first role playing game,
Mhm.
um, Aaron, what I mean, you could have gone in any direction. What makes you want to go in this direction? What was it about the atomic horror or the atomic age that fascinated you?
Well, basically, since I was a little kid, I always loved science fiction, right? I mean, Star Trek was my super big passion, but I grew up watching all of these old 1940s, 50s, and 60s movies on like WGN out of Chicago, on like Saturday mornings, or like with my parents whenever they were on, and I absolutely adored them. And I've always kept that love of those old movies with me through my life. And I've watched tons and tons and tons with my wife. And then I had this really cool idea. Well, why couldn't I make a world where all of this weird B movie stuff is actually really happening, but still keep it as grounded as possible in reality, so it doesn't just suddenly become absolute madness. And that's sort of where the idea for Redacted and Saucer Squadron came, which is the associated game with Redacted.
Yeah, I think Aaron's had this idea for Saucer Squadron, which is a tactical miniatures game,
Hmm.
for quite some time. And when we were discussing, when he finally released that a few months back, we were discussing the world and all that, and I thought it was a really cool concept. And I said, "Do you think it would make a good role playing game?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think so. I think I could build it out into a world that players could interact with." And we just have to put conspiracies at the forefront, weird science at the forefront, and I think that's what we were able to do here. And as far as the B movie kind of theme here, I mean, Aaron's done has his own podcast called Earth versus Soup, where he and his wife go through and watch B movies and review
Hmm.
them. And there are some really heartfelt episodes and some really serious episodes. And so I think, like, this content area is perfect for Aaron to develop a world in.
What do you think is it about those movies and about that time that still resonates to us today?
I think at the very least, a lot of those movies represent a feeling from the general public that the world and science and culture maybe has even just gone completely out of their hands. They've lost control. They've lost the grip on their understanding, because before then, I always say that like the stuff from the 1930s, technology, 30s, even in the 40s, you can sort of look at it and understand how it works. Yeah, there might be vacuum tubes and you have to go test the vacuum tubes, but you can see the wires. You know when something has failed. But now here's something that works at the scale of an atom that can destroy whole cities and can just make people sick from radiation. And it's that sort of fear that the world can end and we won't even understand really how it works.
It's almost like the monsters and the aliens and things that you see in these B movies isn't the scary part. The scary part is what we don't know and what we can't control.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where all these conspiracies come from as well. Like even in modern day,
Hmm.
conspiracies are built up around things that we either don't understand or we might never know. And I think that that's why we wanted to put conspiracies kind of
Hmm.
at the forefront for the role playing, because we thought it would be really fun.
So let's talk a little bit more about the game then. Who exactly can you be in this setting?
Boy, a lot of people. So obviously anyone from Earth, but specifically there's a lot of focus on the US and the Soviets. And because there's cooperation between these agencies that are dealing with alien and alien technology, you have a little bit of bleed over between the US and the Soviets. So if you're playing a Majestic team, you can have Soviet characters in there that are actually assisting, and vice versa. You could also play a couple different alien groups. So there's two groups that we have, three groups, excuse me, that we have statted out. We have like robots or artificial beings that have come to Earth and have either like fallen away from their program or rebelled against it. And now they're helping the treaty agencies. You have the reticulans or the grays, the big black, big black eyes, gray skin. They're the ones that crashed in Roswell, and they're trying to make sure that humanity doesn't wipe itself out. And in doing so, they're going to be a part of these agencies. And then the Hopkinsville Goblins. They're little goblin dudes that have big ears, big eyes. They glow in the dark, and they love eating metal and stone.
Yeah, and so once you choose what character species you're going to be, you also have
Mhm,
archetypes.
mhm,
And we tried to go through a bunch of these old 50s B movies to see like who were our archetypical protagonists, right? So like we have the professor, we have a soldier, we have a lawyer, and like things like that. You basically choose what your career was. We call that your archetype after
mhm,
you choose what species you are.
So let's talk about the rule system a little bit more. So using something called the threshold system, which I believe Once Upon uses as well.
Yes.
Um, Al, could you talk a little bit more about the rule system and how you get it to work for Redacted?
Yeah, because once upon it was like the GM never rolled dice ever. It was very much about storytelling. And redacted, we wanted to kind of get a little bit more action, a little bit more tactical in there. Because obviously we have scenes where military personnel are fighting monsters. So like we wanted to make it feel a little bit more tactical. So we brought in opposed rolls, and the way the rolls work is you roll a pool of d12s based on whatever attribute you're using. And then you look at your proficiencies, which are essentially your skills, and they make it easier to hit a target, so to speak. So your threshold is what number you need on a d12 to roll what's considered a success. So let's say you're fighting against, a mummy, and it's difficulty 2 to hit it with a gun, right? You would get together your pool of dice. You would look at what skill you're using or what competency you're using, and you would tick down on what you need to succeed on each individual die. So typically, a 12 means 2 successes, an 11 means 1 success, and then your competencies can lower that 11 down even further. And competencies can have up to 3 levels. So you can, if you're fully trained in a competency, you would need 8s to be successful on your dice. So it's very similar to Modifius's D20 pool that they use. In that your difficulty is the number of successes you need to roll in your pool to be successful.
What about character creation?
So character creation is pretty quick. You have a certain number of points to assign to your attributes, a certain number of points to add to your competencies. But the fun part is when you get to choose. You get to choose your conspiracy, which is something that you believe is to be true, and your character is always trying to tie their conspiracy into every story. So you get
Mhm.
benefits when you can creatively find a connection between your conspiracy and what your characters are doing. And then Aaron came up with this idea of including special effects, which are kind of like talents in some other games. Special effects are these things that you would see on the screen of the B movie that your characters might
Mhm.
do. And so, like, there's lots of really cool, fun things in there, like one that makes your dynamite explode bigger. One,
Mhm.
we talked about, bad editing job, right? So, like, if you have the bad editing job, special effects once per game, you can teleport essentially to some place that you weren't there initially, and so, like, because the editor did a bad job showing you get there. So,
Mhm.
like, little funny things like that to make it feel like you're actually in a 50s B movie while you're
Mhm.
playing this.
But still
Mm,
keeping it as grounded in reality as
Mhm.
possible, which is weird to say when you just heard that description, because the rest of it is that you cannot just teleport somewhere you normally wouldn't be able to move to. So,
Right.
like, you can't go through locked doors. But, like, yeah, you could just not be in the room anymore. You could be in a different room if there was
Yep.
no locked doors between you. And yeah, it's just a weird edit. Oops, we lost that scene in the edit. Yeah.
Right. Right, and then we have
mm,
one where you can just randomly end up with a prop in your hands that you didn't, a continuity
Mhm.
error, I think it's called.
Yeah,
Um,
continuity error. Mhm.
you can just randomly have a prop that you didn't have initially, because again, they mixed up the scenes when they were
Mhm.
cutting them.
Yeah, it's just ways to modify the scene to make it a little more entertaining or a little more beneficial to your characters.
Yep.
Yeah.
Speaking of scenes, chapter 4, you have something called directing the action. Can you tell us a little bit what tools you have there to help make the game feel, looks like not just feel like a 1950s, like a 1950s film in a sense, but the fact that the fact there's a government agency involved to try to keep things secret added to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think to start with, Aaron and I and all of us that come from Star Trek Adventures very much believe in inclusion. So
Mhm.
we do give some guidance in there on how to include different neurodivergences among your players, which I think is really important. And we talk a little bit about, like, how to build a scene and how to build a plot and how to build to a third act, right? Because we're mimicking kind of like a movie that you would see on the screen. So we give some guidance in there for that. But the really fun thing that I love, and it kind of spills over to the rules chapter as well, is we did include something called a scene test. And basically, a scene test is something where there's a lot of stuff going on in a scene, right? And all the characters are doing their own thing to try to advance the plot of that scene. Um, but instead of rolling individual tests that those characters are doing, they are all rolling essentially together to move the scene forward. So each character is doing something different, but their successes are gathered together as a larger whole. It's
Mhm.
similar to like an extended task in Modifius's 2D20 system,
Mhm.
but in this case, it spans an entire scene. So here's an example. There is a chase scene in one of the adventures that we've published where the characters are trying to get away from a monster, and it's outside and there's snow. So all the characters are doing different things. Are they trying to keep the monsters at bay? Are they trying to get themselves to move faster? Are they trying to remove obstacles in front of them? And each character can narratively describe what they're doing, and their successes are applied to a larger whole of the scene. And each round, if they haven't completed the scene test yet, bad things start happening to them.
Mhm.
So I really, really love that mechanic. And every time that I've run the demos, people have, said how exciting and how fun those scenes were. So that's pretty cool. And then I think Aaron always at the end, we give this little, okay, what do you do next? How do you make
Mhm.
sure that this story doesn't make it out to the public, right?
Mhm. Cover-ups are important in the Majestic universe. Yes.
Yeah. So like every adventure we will have like at the end, how are your characters going to cover this up? Like how are we going to make sure that like for example, are they going to use them as as the scapegoat here and just say that, oh yeah, these people were just talking about a movie. Or maybe one of the characters keeps a camera with them in their bag, and they like at the end, after everything's they walk around with a camera to make it look like they're shooting a movie, things like that.
Mhm.
I think are really going to make it feel like you're in this kind of top secret universe where you're trying to keep the public from knowing what's going on.
Mhm.
Aaron, I'm very keen to hear some of the bad guys in this game. Would you be willing to share?
Yeah, I mean, it at least the basic villains that you can fight are just anyone that you would normally find in a B movie, right? You can have high school bullies, you can have, the local cop that really doesn't get along with anybody. You can have soldiers, like enemy soldiers. You can have monsters of a whole bunch of different kinds, like giant crabs, killer squirrels. There's zombies that are statted out in there. Um, it's whatever you want, and then like there's a couple specific named, well, named, I put air quotes up, people that are in there as antagonists that totally make sense as being antagonists for the 1950s. I don't know if I can
You can say
spoil it.
him.
Oh, it's a specific senator from Wisconsin who is who is definitely an antagonist in this. If you can't tell, it's that Senator Joe McCarthy, who ended up doing a huge Red Scare thing, and yeah, crazy.
Yeah, so basically
There's
there's
yeah,
four tiers, right?
yeah.
We have our minions, which are basically these mindless monsters that run around doing stuff.
Mhm,
And then you get your lackeys who some of them are mindless, some of them are just very controllable, and then you get
mhm,
into your villains and then your arch villains. When you get your arch villains, you're really talking about things that are like worldwide threats. They are very
mhm,
challenging. You almost can't defeat them on your own, right? You need to have help and government assistance and the army helping you and things like that. But they are in there and they are pretty scary.
So, well, some horror games kind of want to push for like a one-shot type of adventure. This looks like more like a campaign-driven ideas. Am I
mhm.
understanding this correctly?
Oh, for sure, for sure. It can easily be a campaign. Yes, there's political intrigue that can definitely happen because I mean you have two major superpowers at the beginning of the 1950s, and more come into the treaty, which I should say the trilateral treaty is the whole thing that sort of holds these agencies together across multiple nations. But yeah, more nations end up coming into this treaty later on, and you get a lot of cooperation, backstabbing, uh, figuring out what you can and can't get away with. So yeah, there's all of that in there. It can be you could easily run Redacted as just like an espionage thriller.
I
Um,
The way that I see it, Aaron, and Manny, is if you think about like X Files, right? X Files would have its one shot Monster of the Week episodes,
Mhm,
but then it would have like your 2 or 3 episode parts that touch the larger story. I think Redacted is built really well for that.
mhm,
Like if you need a one shot Monster of the Week palette cleanser, it makes perfect sense to do. But if you want to do the larger overarching espionage, spy thriller type stuff, you can do that for a couple of episodes during a campaign.
mhm.
And I think it fits really, really well.
I love the flexibility of this game. They could go in many different directions. That's awesome. When and where can I get a copy of this book?
Well, we chose the release date of October 30th, and that is because that is the anniversary of the War of the Worlds scare that happened ages ago. And
Mhm.
we thought that it fit really well with our cover, with our theme, and all that fun stuff. And then on Drive Through RPG, it's going to be available in PDF, softcover, and hardcover on the 30th. So we're pretty excited about that.
Just to let that viewers know that if real life political horror story I love Joe McCarthy is not enough for you, reading about what happened with the World of Worlds broadcast is very
Mhm.
fascinating. For those of you who don't know, they did a radio play of War of the Worlds, and a lot of people believed that it was actually happening, and it caused a huge scare, and it was
Mhm.
a very interesting story. Speaking of that, inspirations. What movies of that are really still resonate with you today?
Wow. See, I can go on. I'll go first. Go first because I mean, yeah.
So for me, I my inspiration is less about the movies because I'm not as familiar with those. I'm My inspiration is coming from real life stories, right? Um, like I have been studying ufology for a long time, and we live in an area that's right next to Exeter, New Hampshire, with the famous Exeter UFO chase, um, and so like that type of thing has been fascinating to me since I was in 8th grade and I did a report on it. And, being able to see, like, drive down the road and see where the abductions, happened and where they returned and things like that.
Mhm.
Like, that is my inspiration, is the quote unquote real stories. And how would that look if those things were actually real? And the government knew about them. And that's kind of where my love is coming from for this game.
I'm kind of the same as Al in a lot of ways. Like I read a ton of UFO stuff as a kid, and even to this day I have. And so like yeah, I can talk about the Hopkinsville goblins and all these major sightings, the Flatwoods monster. But like I also love these old movies. So for like the movies, I could literally go on for hundreds of movies just talking about each one of them, going, okay, well, there's this really cool aspect to it. But out of them, I love the George Pal War of the Worlds. Um, I love that movie. I love Time Machine. I love. I'm trying to pick out like the best ones. Um, I love Day of the Triffids, which is kind of like a little lesser known one. Monolith Monsters. That's a fantastic movie that deals with crystals that have come from outer space and are just sucking the like calcium and all of this out of things around them, including people, and they're growing and they're not alive. It's just like this giant threat that is a scientific based threat, and they need water to grow but like will be destroyed by salt. Great movie. And then like On the Beach is probably one of the hardest hitting like nuclear horror, atomic horror movies. Even though it might not be science fiction, it's a very bleak movie that deals with like the last survivors of a nuclear exchange living in Australia, and they know that death is coming for them because the fallout is slowly moving further and further south, and they're living the last days of their lives. And it's really hard hitting, but it provides a good insight into that kind of like fear of the nuclear, just nuclear annihilation for the time.
Yeah, and
Mm.
and as we're starting to do with all Yellow Hand products, we are putting specific chapters into our books that talk about the inspiration. So, like, if you want to know what you could, reference or go look at to get inspired for the game, we're putting, the books, the movies, the things that like we consider when we're writing, right in there. And we're like, we did it with Tales of Medicine Mystery. We're doing it here with Redacted. And we're already looking at a couple of other of our role playing games that we're going to add those in there, because I think it's a bonus for GMs who are looking for specific ideas that maybe aren't as familiar with the content. So that's going to be something that you see coming from all Yellow Hand products moving forward, which is awesome.
Mm. And I do want to say that there's also an adventure in here, or at least there's a
Mhm.
section here called missions, which I love that in a role playing game, because sometimes when I get a new game, I try to figure out the beat and the tone of what I'm trying to run, and an adventure that's in the game helps me find that really quickly. Um, I tend to not to spoil too much about the adventure side of things. I want readers to discover them. But is there anything about that section that you wanted to share?
I'll go first.
No, I think Aaron, you can talk about the topic of the adventure. I think.
Well, it's a real life disaster that occurred, and tragedy, and I wanted to talk about how conspiracies can affect people's own perception of what has happened, because it's a tragedy that a lot of people might have heard of. If you're probably playing Redacted, you probably have heard of it, but your own biases also will impact how you approach it. So it's sort of a look at why conspiracies are important to the game system, as well as how they affect you in real life. But yeah, it's a tragedy, and you're taken out of your comfort zone to go and try to help solve it, because no one knows what happened. And it does not disrespect the victims. It tries
Right.
to, I try to very clearly point out that these people were victims. You shouldn't make light of their deaths, that they should be remembered, and it was a very bad tragedy. But yeah, it links all into the whole subject matter of Redacted.
Yeah, essentially, without spoiling anything,
Mhm.
uh, you get to go investigate a scene before any authorities get a chance to go and investigate
Mhm.
where this event happened, and it leads to some really wild stuff. We also have our little mini mission briefs in there,
Mhm.
which are basically one-page short stories that you can turn into adventures. We actually have a couple of our writers from the Yellow Hand, like from Australia, that wrote a couple of them, like one about the Australian Yowie, which was kind of cool.
Mhm.
And so our goal when we start producing more content will be to always have at least one adventure and a few like of these adventure brief, adventure seed type things, so that at least you have some place to start with your story if you need those ideas.
All right, excellent. So again, on October 30th, this will be out. This will be out to Drive to RPG and other websites.
Drive through
Mhm.
RPG, yeah, you can find it on the yellowhand.com as well. We'll redirect you there.
Excellent. I will put all those links in the description below. Al and Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about Redacted.
I hope everybody enjoys it. I hope everybody enjoys it. Yeah, it's sort of a passion project that's been rattling around, at least in my brain, for over a decade. So,
Yeah, my thing would be, if you pick this up and you enjoy it and you run it and you like the world, also check out the tactical miniatures game, which is
mhm,
called Saucer Squadron. You'll notice that the cover looks very similar to this. Some people ask, can you do the flying saucers in Redacted? We've kind of designed this to be more the boots on the ground level,
mhm,
and we want our saucer combat stuff to stay in the tactical game. But there's no reason why you couldn't get to a point where maybe some type of saucer combat happens and you pause Redacted and then pull out the Saucer Squadron maps and play it out. Like, you could
mhm,
absolutely do that if you wanted to. It's a different system than what we're using in the role playing game, but it still narratively would work just fine. So yeah, and I'm excited to see the response. I mean, all the preview copies that we've sent out are getting people pretty excited. So yeah, can't wait to hear what everybody thinks.
Excellent. Again, I'll put all that in the description below. Thank you both. And to our viewers out there, thank you for watching. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next time.